Hey, welcome back or welcome for the first time. To all my new listeners, thank you so much for tuning in. To all of my day 1, 3, 100, 207, whatever week you chose to tune in and keep listening, I genuinely appreciate you. So let me ask you something real quick. Have you ever looked back at something that deeply hurt you and realized later like, oh, okay, so God was actually protecting me there, right? Because I know I have. And I think rejection is one of those things that almost everybody says builds character, but in the moment, it feels horrible. Like nobody enjoys rejection. Nobody enjoys not being chosen. Nobody enjoys being overlooked. Nobody enjoys feeling unwanted. And nobody enjoys closed doors. And if I'm being honest, I think rejection has been one of the hardest things for me emotionally because for a long time, I tied rejection to my worth. So if something didn't work out, or if somebody walked away, if an opportunity closed, if I wasn't chosen, if I wasn't pursued the way I wanted to be pursued, or if I wasn't acknowledged the way that I thought I should be acknowledged, somewhere deep down, I internalized it as there must be something wrong with me. And what's wild is sometimes rejection will hit places in you that you didn't even realize were still wounded, because logically you can know, okay, this situation probably wasn't right for me, but emotionally, man, you may feel embarrassed or disappointed, and you may replay conversations in your head or start to wonder what you could have done differently. And honestly, I think sometimes we spend way too much time grieving doors that God intentionally closed. Don't worry, I'll pause real quick and let that marinate. Because hindsight has really been humbling me lately. And there are situations that I cried over, begged God, why couldn't you let this happen? And these are things that I absolutely would not want now. There are relationships I thought I needed that honestly would have drained me. There are opportunities I thought I was ready for that would have completely overwhelmed me. And there are people I wanted validation from who honestly just didn't have the capacity to love me well. But when you're in the middle of rejection, it's hard to see any of that, because rejection has a way of making you focus on what you lost instead of what you were protected from. And if I'm being honest, I think one of the biggest lessons I've been learning is that sometimes I was trying to force things that simply did not fit. Like, girl, why were you fighting so hard for something that required you to shrink? Or why were you trying so hard to convince people of your value? Yikes. And why were you trying to make misalignment feel comfortable? And honestly, sometimes rejection hurts extra bad because your ego is involved. Like, sometimes it's not even that you truly wanted the thing you were hoping for. You just wanted to be chosen. And that revelation can be really uncomfortable, because I think for a lot of us, rejection taps into deeper fears, like fear of not being enough, fear of being forgotten. I know I really struggle with that, the whole out of sight, out of mind thing. Fear of being unwanted or fear of being replaceable. And if you don't deal with those deeper insecurities, rejection can make you start chasing things that were never meant for you in the first place. And honestly, I have done that way more times than I would like to admit. I've tried to force consistency where there was inconsistency. And I'm not even going to talk about how many times I've tried to romanticize potential. And I've also tried to keep doors open that God was clearly closing. And then later I would look back and be like, oh, yeah, okay, so this wasn't rejection. This was actually redirection. Because the thing about God is sometimes he will remove you from things you would have stayed attached to out of comfort, loneliness, insecurity, or familiarity. And at the time, it feels so painful. Yes, it does. I will not pretend like it doesn't. but later you realize he was saving you from unnecessary heartbreak, unnecessary confusion, unnecessary compromise, or even unnecessary delay. And what's interesting is sometimes rejection doesn't even mean the thing was bad. It just means it wasn't aligned with what he has for you and who he created you to be. And I think maturity is learning not to take every closed door personally, because everything that doesn't work out is not proof that you are unworthy. Sometimes it's just proof that God sees something that you don't. And honestly, I think one of the hardest parts about rejection is accepting that closure doesn't always come with an explanation. Sometimes people won't explain themselves well, or they won't explain themselves at all. Sometimes opportunities will disappear without any sort of warning, and sometimes relationships will shift and you'll never really understand why. And if you're not careful, you can waste years trying to decode things God simply wanted you to release. And that's something I've really been working on lately, because I'm naturally someone who likes to understand the why behind whatever. I like clarity, I like answers, I like things to make sense, and rejection rarely feels neat and clear. Sometimes it's awkward, sometimes it's confusing, and sometimes it bruises your confidence. But I can honestly say there are so many things that I thank God for now that I once cried over. And that perspective shift has changed everything, because now, instead of immediately spiraling when rejection happens, I've started to ask different questions. So instead of asking what's wrong with me, I'm learning to ask, what if this is protection? And instead of asking, why wasn't I chosen? I'm learning to ask, what if this simply wasn't meant for me? And instead of trying to force doors open, I'm learning to trust that what is truly aligned for me will not require me to abandon myself to keep it. Because healthy things usually don't require constant convincing, constant anxiety, constant chasing, or constant self-betrayal. And peace has become way more important to me than proving myself, because younger me definitely wanted to prove that I was lovable, that I was valuable, that I was talented, and that I was worthy. But now I'm realizing I don't want anything that requires me to audition for belonging. So even though rejection has humbled me, it has also refined me, and it has taught me to stop placing my identity in outcomes. It has also taught me that closed doors are not necessarily punishment, because God can see 10 steps ahead while I'm over here still emotionally attached to step 2. And oh my goodness, I thank God for his protection, because if every single thing I wanted worked out exactly the way I wanted it to, I probably would have ended up in situations that look good initially, but slowly would have destroyed my peace. And I also wouldn't be where I am now, which is exactly where I'm supposed to be. So if you're listening to this and you're grieving some kind of rejection right now, I really want to encourage you not to define yourself by who or what did not choose you. Because even though rejection is painful, it's not always personal. Because sometimes it's preparation, sometimes it's protection, sometimes it's pruning, and sometimes it's redirection to what God does have for you. So that's what I have for y'all this week. Thank you so much for tuning in. As always, make sure you're taking care of yourself mentally, emotionally, spiritually, and physically. Be healthy in your relationships. Do not take rejection personally. It is not what defines you. You are defined by who God says you are. And if you don't know who that is, and you don't know who he says you are, get to know him so that you can get to know that. So I love y'all so much, and I will talk to y'all next week. Bye.